Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Alex Reneman, and he is the president, CEO, and founder at Mountain Leverage. And Mountain Leverage, I'm guessing the name comes from being based out of West Virginia, out there in the West Virginia mountains. But they are bringing voice technology to the industrial side of things and into the warehouse specifically. So we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the journey of Mountain Leverage, but we're also going to dive into voice technology, what that means for warehouse operations, how it works, and kind of what the future of that looks like too as well. So Alex, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me on, Kevin. I'm doing great, and congratulations to you having crossed the 500 episode mark. That's big, man. So big congrats to you and the show you put on. That's a testament to the value you put out in these things. So thanks on behalf of the whole industry for doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that very much. And you're a podcaster yourself too, so I'm sure you can relate on the grind it takes to put that many episodes out and everything like that. So I really appreciate those kind words and happy to do that and happy to deliver some value. So really happy to get you on here and talk to you about Mountain Leverage and learn a little bit more about the company and talk about voice technology overall. So why don't you kind of start by, I guess, giving us a brief overview of Mountain Leverage and kind of tell us too, like, I mean, how did you come to start this company? What led you to creating Mountain Leverage?
That's a good question. I don't think we have enough time to do the whole thing because it is a little bit of a circuitous route, as people say, or
Yeah.
zigzag. But I did, growing up in a small town here in West Virginia, I watched how hard my parents worked and how hard the community worked, and kind of work was always, in my blood. And like you go work, and so as a young person, lots of ways to work is you got to go do your own thing. And so the entrepreneurial thing
Yeah.
really kind of got in early and then was just continually fostered by the folks around me, community, mentors, my parents, all that, to build a business, to be your own boss, that kind of thing. Not in an iconoclastic way, but just that's the way you
Yeah.
can do great things in the world. And that was what was kind of set in my mind. So that was always right there in what I wanted to
Mm.
do. And even after spending time at the university there in West Virginia, it was okay. And I did have a distribution course in my business class in supply chain, but it was not
Okay.
exciting. I was maybe it was the instructor, maybe it was the content. I don't know, but it wasn't like
Yeah.
I left the university saying I'm going to get into supply chain. But I did go after graduation. I went to work at Deloitte Consulting and had just an unbelievable experience to be able to see so much going on in business and strategy. And that was around the .com and things where all these business models are being tried and being crushed by the market. And it was it was an exciting time to be a young person with a little bit of
Mm.
knowledge and a lot of wide eyes. And so from that point, I said, man, I can do this. I can do this back home. I want to bring this back home, bring some economy back home. And I did. And so in the fall of 2002, I moved back here, and that was somewhat, I guess, started by the idea when September 11th happened back almost a year before that.
Mm.
I realized I'm not really making a big difference in my community. I'm up here, I'm doing great work, I'm traveling around, it's fun, meeting great people, but I'm not doing something for my community. So really, that was a big piece of moving back
Mm.
home for my family, for my community, and I started the business. Not the business I'm currently working because that was interrupted by about a 15-month deployment to Iraq. But when I got
Okay.
back, got a call from a former colleague at Deloitte and said, "Hey, there's this voice company in Pittsburgh that needs some help, and we think you might be the guy to help them out."
Interesting. Okay. All right. Yeah, I was curious, like how you ended up getting to voice, and I think it's interesting too. You mentioned the distribution course you had there in school wasn't too interesting. So I mean, along that way, and when you're doing your consulting and things like that, I mean, through with Deloitte, and I mean, where did kind of maybe like what really, I guess, maybe caught your attention about just like supply chain in general?
Yeah, that and so this is varied in an answer, right? So it was, that one course was interesting, but wasn't really that interesting. But I've
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
been a problem solver, trying to optimize this, optimize that. What's this complex solution? How do systems work? And I mean, really, and those of us that are in the industry of supply chain, you get. I mean, it looks
Yeah.
like yeah, pick, pack, and ship, right? No big deal. It's just a box going in and out. And oh my gosh, the complexity of problems you're solving, sometimes on the minute scale, sometimes on the macro scale, is just really kind of exciting. But it didn't catch on to that until I did get a chance when I was at Deloitte to get into some implementations on ERP, enterprise resource planning
Mm.
systems or large accounting systems that oftentimes would involve warehousing and those things. So really, that was my first taste of that. And then obviously, when I got engaged with Vocalect at the time, was that they've since been bought a couple times through acquisitions. That was that voice technology that was being implemented in supply chain, and all of that together. The fact that there's this cool technology, there's this really this vast problem, but also in many ways over, and every distribution center looks different, even though they look the same from the outside.
Yeah.
That just always really exciting. But I'll tell you the one thing, honestly, that probably kept me here, Kevin, is because the strategy was still to kind of, to your point about naming, mountain leverage. It was about leveraging the mountains, as goofy as that sounds, but to build really an onshoring software development company. That was the idea. I always would joke and say, well, the time zone is great and the language barrier is probably not as bad as somewhere overseas, So with our hillbilly accent and all that good stuff, which I've embraced and I love.
Yeah.
But really, what kept me here, honestly, I know this sounds so cheeky, but and I mean, there's schmucks everywhere, but this industry is full of really good people just trying to do good things.
Yeah.
And every time we would go on site somewhere and meet another prospect or a customer or a partner or anybody in this industry, just full of good people. And so that really just kind of it ticked all the boxes for me. It just kind of kept me in the industry. And here we are 20 years later, and it's been a fun ride.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an interesting story. And I think it's incredibly, I mean, first off, I mean, thanks for your service. Absolutely. And then, second off, I mean, I think it's really admirable that you wanted to come back to your community, kind of where you came from, and invest in the community, figure out how can we, do something here. And I know you're doing a couple of things around that as well as nonprofit and things like that. So it's great to see that. And, I'm curious, I mean, when you got this connection to Vocal Act and, this voice technology, I mean, what really kind of drew you into that to kind of make that the focus of your business overall?
Yeah, that's a good question. When I saw the technology, it was cool. I mean, we've all voices for at least the hearing world, voice is native. We've all been being told what to do and
Yeah.
we've responded back. And so it's a very native interface. And that was cool to kind of watch users adapt who maybe have been struggling in a more traditional method of scanning or paper or whatever it may be, to just adapt and begin to thrive. And we got to see the worker satisfaction when implemented well. And so it was one of those things where, yes, this helps make our customers, those companies, money. It's also cool
Mm.
technology, and also the worker who's actually using it, their worker satisfaction goes through the roof. And so when you can combine all those, it feels like a total win. And so
Yeah.
it's just been one thing. I've just built one thing after the other, and have been fortunate enough to gather great folks on the team, and we've had a lot of fun in this industry.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I've used voice technology in the past and in past roles as well with some of the workers. And, I think it's very interesting. So, I mean, I guess from your perspective, maybe for people that aren't quite familiar with how you can use voice technology within a warehouse setting, why don't you kind of give us some ideas there, and how, you've seen some applications and how you put in applications in place to be able to use voice technology.
Yeah, again, voice is that natural interface. So,
Hmm.
but the best way to look at it on a macro is anything that needs some bit of direction, maybe some additional information, potentially some pacing, and the ability to respond back with either, "Hey, I got it," a confirmation acknowledgement, or "Here's a quantity," or whatever else. Voice could be a great fit for it. It doesn't mean it will be, but it could be. So then you start paring that down, and really, what caught fire several years ago, a couple decades ago, was in supply chain, where workers, if you imagine, walking around the warehouse floor, picking pieces or cases, putting them into a pallet or into boxes, whatever it may be, walking that worker through. So we use the same system, the same warehousing system that's out there today that would run a scanner or print out paper or whatever else. And we take that and we then extrapolate that into a headset that basically speaks to the user and says, go to aisle 15, pick up 3 cans of beans or whatever it is. They grab it, say
Yeah.
they've got it, or they say the quantity or a check digit. There's all kinds of nuances within there. And then we send that message back to the host. And so it really is, it's a workflow solution that's out on the edge that allows the worker to be, more efficient, more productive, or I mean, sorry, more accurate, because they're looking at the work. Their hands are free, their eyes are free.
Mhm.
They're not laying something down, looking away, coming back. All those kinds of things that happen that eat away at your productivity or your margins in a warehouse. And also, it's safe. I mean, you're not trying to drive a forklift and looking at screens or whatever else.
Mhm.
And then I think that piece that I just touched on a minute ago, that worker satisfaction piece. I mean, a satisfied worker is just going to do a better job, and it's better, right? From a human perspective, we all want to be
Yeah.
better, but at the same time, it just helps all that. So really, that's where voices primarily fit in. Now we're taking it lots of other areas, lots of other workflows outside the four walls, outside of distribution, but that's really been the bread and butter of the last couple of decades, and it's really been an amazing implementation when done right.
Mm, interesting. Yeah, yeah, and I think that that efficiency gain is certainly there when you put voice into play because, like I mentioned, I've used it in the past as well, and I think you touched on two like major points there. I think that always stands out to me when you're looking at especially like in a picking application or a, high velocity picking application where if you have a handheld, right, like you said, like you got to place it down, right, or you got to be looking at the screen, or you got to all that stuff. Whereas voice, you can truly be like hands free with it, and be able to do what you need to do and recall information if you need it, and be able to get to that product to do that. And from a safety standpoint too, which you touched on there, which I think is really important, is if you're on an order picker or forklift or whatever the case may be, picking those orders, then you're not looking at that screen, you're not getting distracted. It's the same as driving a vehicle and looking at your cell phone, right? It's the same
That's right.
exact thing. So you avoid that, and you're able to really give that worker a better experience overall. I'm curious on that experience side, right? So one of the conversations I've been having a lot lately, I would say, well, for quite some time, I think, is around user experience and like the user interface, and how does that change things for the worker in the warehouse? How does that help the next generation better adapt to coming into like this type of work setting, and things of that nature? I mean, so how do you approach kind of the experience for the user, and how do you maybe frame it, or how do you explain the experience improvement to someone who's maybe looking to make a switch from what they're doing currently and maybe weighing voice as an option?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a hard one. It's a nuance that's sometimes hard to see on the surface.
Yeah.
But when you look at again, voice being that native interface for all of us, it's also across generation. And I want to paint with a broad brush. People overdo the generational stuff, but the reality
Mm,
is, I mean, right now, workers entering the workforce are in a mobile generation. They've been talk to text. They've been doing things for ever since they've been old enough to really understand how those things work. And so when you look at an interface, how to train somebody, and then the pacing, kind of instead of again, I'm going to use the generational thing. It can be overused. There's always exceptions to the rule, but past generations, it might be, hey, here's the objective we're looking for, and there's going to be lots of tasks you got to figure out in between. Go get that done. The current generations are much more looking for kind of step by step, or here's these things, do these, come back, And so when you look at how voice is implemented, typically, now when it's done well, and everything can be done poorly, but when it's done well, it really does cross generations. So the mobile generation embraces it as its way. It feels like new technology. It feels hip. It feels okay. They're in a warehouse. Of course, they look around. They know where they are, but they're engaging with newer technology, similar to how robotics right now is getting a lot of that buzz. But at the same time, it's not something so complex that your older workers or your other generational workers who are going to look at this and go, "I'm out." They've been
yeah.
talking to people back and forth their entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's kind of it's interesting like how you put that, because it does kind of span those generations, right? Because everybody, I mean, for the most part, can talk, and they're used to, whether it's talking on the phone or talk to text, like you
Right.
mentioned, right? They're able to do that, and say those commands, and I'm curious too. I mean, when you look at voice technology like that, I think sometimes some of the hesitations that I've heard in the past are sometimes like language barriers and things like that. You mentioned the hillbilly accent there is a different language potentially. So I mean, how does the technology kind of work around different language speakers and things of that nature to make them feel more comfortable too? Because in the warehousing industry, I mean, there's a huge prevalence of people who English is not their first language, right?
That's right. That's right. And I think as much as we're surrounded now by speech recognition, if you try to take a commercial recognition and go and work on it for an 8 hour, 10 hour shift, whatever you're doing, you would want to put
Yeah.
your head through the concrete wall because there's just you cannot have that many errors and those things. So really, there's a couple ways to go about that. One is what traditionally was in the space where you basically train templates, and these templates are recognize how
Mm,
you say certain words, and that's on the speaking side of it. But the independent recognizers have just been really increasing over these last, again, from the time we started in this till now. It's amazing how much better those are. So those are great options. And they also help you in certain states that have different privacy laws about having templates of any kind, whether it's a fingerprint or a voice print or whatever it may
mm,
be. So you have really kind of either option. On the other side, though, where now the speech to text or the text to speech is coming back for you to hear a direction or whatever, there are just so many opportunities now. Languages, dialects within languages, you can begin to tweak those things. You can customize them. So really, that whole conversation. I'm sure there are minor dialects somewhere in the world that don't yet have a great
yeah.
text to speech engine for them, but most cases they do. And so as workers are as warehouses are bringing in workers from where English isn't their second language, and we have a ton of customers like that. There's a lot of clever ways to implement that. In some cases, they may be able to hear in English but speak back in their language. And that's great if your supervisors are only English speakers or whatever else. So there's lots of
Yeah.
strategies when you go to implement a system like this that can really optimize it for your footprint and what you have with your workers and your operations and locations.
Mm. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. It's really good to hear because I think, you have so many situations. I mean, I know like a lot of the Spanish that I've learned to speak is from my warehouse workers that work for me because I got tired of asking for translations. And I started to
Right.
tell them just tell me how to say it, right?
Yep.
And I think you see more and more in that, and
Sure.
especially as the labor pool and these challenges that we hear about labor in the warehousing industry. We need to get more diverse and go out there and we see people come in where like we said, English is not their first language, and being able to have a technology that can work around that and certainly adapt to that, I think makes that worker feel more comfortable, right? And like they can get up to speed faster probably and fit in. And then it also helps on the back end too, where you're able to, like you said, get those translations in whatever language you want to receive them in, and be able to still accomplish what you need to accomplish, which I think is very important. So very interesting there, and very interesting to learn about the voice technology and how that's kind of evolved a little bit, and your thoughts on it. So, I'm curious from your perspective here because we're talking about user experience and the workforce itself, and a lot of that has to do with culture. And I know like you're a big kind of company culture guy, right? You have a
Yeah.
strong company culture within Mountain Leverage, and I'm curious from a solution provider perspective, how do you take that company culture that you've cultivated internally, and then how do you translate that into ultimately the end user and that warehouse worker that's like your, I guess, your customers employees?
Yeah, we've had lots of conversations and lots of thinking over this, lots of creative
Yeah.
abrasion, as we say, because it's you're right. It's like, why is it important to anybody else? Okay, great. We have a great culture here we love and we think
Mhm.
is really helping each of us here flourish, and that's important to me. That's important to each of us here at Mountain Leverage. But what does that matter outside? And that's where it all starts with what we call as our pact. And it's an acronym, and it sounds cheesy. It can be hanging on anybody's wall, but we live it, and it all starts with the P is possibility. So instead of starting with what we can't do or what this has never been done, blah blah blah, it's how can we do it? Is there a way to do that? That's then balanced by accountability. It's got to make sure it matters and it counts and it's making a difference and we're doing what we said we're going to do. All
Mhm.
those things. Then it's championship. I mean, we're lifting one another up, and ultimately, it's all wrapped up in trust that we are trusting one another. That we're saying we're going to do what we say we're going to do. We know we're about our good intentions. We're trying to do the right things, and if we just live that within our company, that's fantastic. But it's way more
Mhm.
important, I think, to extend that to our customers. So when we work with our customers, they should feel that exact environment. They should that agreement, that pact that we have internally at Mountain Leverage, we share with our customers, our partners, our suppliers, really any stakeholder we engage with, because it matters. It matters to us, and it matters that not only do we help them optimize their business for peak performance, but they'll enjoy working with us, and they'll be better off for it. And we'll all be better off. And that sounds arrogant. I don't mean it that way, but just I think it's one
Yeah.
of those things where lots of conventional business leaders, as I was coming up in this, asked me, or really kind of told me, son, nobody's gonna care about this. It doesn't matter. This isn't important. Focus on this. Bottom line. Blah blah blah. Speeds and feeds. And I guess I tell you, Kevin, over and over, I look at our customer loyalty. I look at our engagement with our
Mm,
customers. It just feels different, man. And I think we enjoy it. Our customers enjoy it. And yeah, it's important to me. As you can tell, I get pretty passionate about it.
yeah.
But I think it's where the real magic happens. The technology's cool, and we got some great folks that really understand things and how to optimize businesses. But that human piece, that connection, that culture piece is primo in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that makes such a difference in the kind of customer vendor relationship, and really makes it more into a partnership overall, and for the long term. And there's I mean, there's companies out there that could offer the same product, essentially same solutions, but that the difference maker typically is that human element. And how do you work with that vendor, and how do you work with that customer, and how do you make that happen? So I'm curious for anybody that's listening, that's like a warehouse manager or a leader within a warehouse space, and they're trying to cultivate a culture within their building or their operation or their organization. What would be your advice to kind of, I guess, approach that and start to lay the foundation for that, and then start to grow that throughout the operation?
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm always careful offering advice because everybody's situation is different, and we're not perfect. We don't have it all figured out. But I will
Yeah.
say, I think one of the things that I continue to try to tell myself, it's advice I tell myself on a daily basis almost, you got to repeat yourself. I mean, the things that you think are important, you said once, okay, you got to keep it. If you have decided, if your team and you have decided on a culture, something that's important, not just made up. Don't go find something online. What I did for in our business is I started looking at kind of my upbringing and the culture, the tenets that mattered and made me who I am. And then I started looking around the company and I watched how our people behaved and the kind of people I was hiring for character, and out of that distilled some really key core concepts, that behaviors that I saw. And that kind of came together. And that was a collaborative effort within our company. And once we had that, if you just have it and put it on the wall, okay, that's a great step, but you've
Yeah.
got to inculcate it into everything you do. And so we talk about it a lot. We implement it a lot when we're on a conversation. So we get off with a customer or a prospect, and we're talking about how we can solve this problem. You will hear employees pop up and say, "Well, this is warrior spirit. We got to fight through this. We got to do this thing." Or this is all about artisan perspective. We've got to be more careful about this is artisanry. We got to be real exact how we do this here. We can't just come in and bull rush this. And it just is a thread through everything. And if you don't keep repeating it, you don't keep living it, you don't keep acting it, it just gets lost because you won't realize it. But employees come in and they go, and things happen and they don't. And all this and all of a sudden, you haven't talked about your culture in months and months and months, maybe years, and nobody really gets it. And so, be authentic for sure, but I think
Mhm.
it's that just you got to live it, and you got to live it on a daily basis, and that's not easy because of all the things that are being pushed on supply chain leaders today. To add one more thing of, let me set a good culture here, is just it's I get it. It feels oppressive. But that culture will help you lift through those challenges that come in when a customer comes back to you and says, "I need you to change your entire operation because I want something different now," or whatever it is. That culture is what sees you through those rough patches for sure.
Mm, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. I mean, I love to, be consistent with it and continue to drive that message, and then, back it up too, and live that message yourself, and be able to, show what that means and exemplify that. I think goes a long way. I think that's really, really great advice there. Even though I know you're hesitant about giving advice, but I think that was great advice there. So thank you for that. And, as we look towards the future, and we talk about voice technology, and voice technology has been around for some time now. What does the future of voice technology look like, specifically in the warehouse environment?
Yeah, this is a fun question because you're right. Voice isn't the new kid on the block. It's been
Yeah.
around for a while, and it's not as old as barcoding, but it's certainly not as hot and sexy as robotics and now AI that's rolling into this proliferation of that. But I love it. We've said for a while, and I won't steal your phraseology now because you've kind of made it real with warehousing
Mhm.
is sexy, right?
Yeah.
And so we've jokingly said that as well. But I think if warehouses are sexy, then at this point voice is irresistible because what's happening in the market today,
Okay.
you have
I like
outdated
that.
technologies. Yeah, thanks. I would just pile right on.
Yeah.
You have outdated technologies, you have outdated processes, and then you've got what's really attractive in robotics and again the forthcoming AI and the data revolution that's happening there. But I think for most of the market, when they look, they want the results that come from this automation, the automation that they see, whether it's at Modex or ProMat, or they see it on a video or whatever else, and their CEO or they're the owner or the VP of distribution comes and says, "Hey, I want to do this thing. Let's go do this robotics thing, or let's just do this exciting thing." It's like, okay. First of all, there's an expense to this, and it's quite prohibitive. So that kind of takes out a huge swath of the market. But the next is, okay, maybe we can't afford it, but how are we going to maintain it? How are we going to tune it? How are we going to continue to optimize this as our business changes and flexes and ebbs and flows and gets more complex? And that takes out another huge swath. So while robotics is coming and it's here for some customers, of course, most of the market is just not able to be there yet for all kinds of good reasons. And so that's where I think voice is having a renaissance, because what we can bring them is a step on that path to automation. And so there's phraseology you use. I've seen it attributed to multiple people. It's Lou Holtz or anybody else, but it's a win. Voice is a win for automation, and that's an
Yeah.
acronym. What's important now? And now a customer can go in today and they can implement voice with an eye for automation. And not only will voice help them prepare themselves for automation, it'll also begin to pay for future automations. And I guess the story I can share is my son loves cars right now. He's a teenager and he's all about cars, and he will continue to try to lobby my mother or his mother, my wife, for buying
Yeah.
some car. Now, we talked about me being in West Virginia, and I love West Virginia. There's so many great things here, but there are
Yeah.
many brands of cars that if you buy one, I'm driving 100 miles to get it fixed or anything like that. There's not
Oh,
multiple
wow.
mechanics here to get it done. Right. And
Yeah.
so in those cases, I continue to tell him, first of all, it's probably more expensive than what we want because he's excited about whatever the flash is. And second of all, we
Mhm.
can't maintain that thing. We'd have to constantly be going out. And I think that's the situation many warehouses are in today, that they see this thing, it looks awesome, and they think, boy, that'd be great in our business. But there's infrastructure that has to be put in place. There's people they need to be able to hire and train, and there needs to be funding to be able to pull these things off. And not only that, as the market consolidates, we're in that phase of where that market is in robotics. There's going to be consolidations, and if you choose early, so there's all kinds of challenges. And I don't want to discourage anyone from going that direction. In fact, we partner with many of those companies out there. But it's
Mhm.
just, I think it's this exciting time for voice, because voice was really hot in the early 2000s, mid 2010s,
Yeah.
whatever, and it's in some degrees and for lots of reasons there's been acquisitions and consolidations, and really a lot of folks who a lot of these and we've given the loving name orphans. A lot of the orphans, they put money, they put an investment in voice, and they've really done well. They received that investment, but at this point it kind of stagnated a bit because of a lot of what happened in the market. And we're at a stage now where we're certainly one of the providers. There are very few of us left that are kind of, it's a renaissance, and it's really cool because now folks who've invested in that can carry their investment forward, and folks who haven't can come in and help them get themselves a path to that automation piece. So it's exciting time for us, to be candid with you, Kevin.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such great points in there, because there is so much, like you said, the flash, right, around these robotics, automation, AI, all these like cutting edge technologies, and yeah, voice doesn't get as much attention or love as maybe it should, right, as those things do. And I think it's important, like you said, to understand like what is that foundation look like before you get to automation and robotics,
That's right.
and voice can be one of those steps and one of those building blocks within that journey. Because if you're not optimizing your workflows and you're not optimizing your processes as much as you can before you get to that point of robotics and automation, like in a lot of scenarios, I think you'll probably end up getting disappointed, because you won't get the gains and
That's right.
efficiency that is being marketed by these companies, or is being expected, where the messaging has kind of been or perceived as a robot. I'll put robots in and it's going to take care of all my problems, right? And that's not really the case, right? You need to put that foundational building blocks in place to be able to do that. So I think that's a great point there that you have, and definitely a great perspective as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is interesting now, that there was a mindset back in the day, and it's still out there, permeates itself in different industries where, well, it has to be a completely replaced solution or whatever else. But voice is a
Mhm.
great complementary solution. Maybe you're scanning in one area of your business, you have RFID over here, maybe you're gonna got vision going, you got robotics in. That sounds like a nightmare. I'm sure some of the IT guys who are listening just went, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to start going to my warehouse." But the point is,
Yeah.
it's a
Why did you
complementary
suggest
technology.
that?
Yeah, exactly. It's a complementary technology. We can come in and optimize and provide value today and help, again, to your point, help those folks on that path. And it just becomes it becomes a nice ramp, as opposed to we're going to suffer through and we're going to let gains go away. We're going to do nothing today. We're status quo is going to sit, and competition is going to move forward, gains are going to be lost, and then we're going to try to climb this mountain to robotics at some point in the future. And I think it's a great ramp. So for us, we feel like we're in a pretty fortunate situation where there's a huge customer base out there that's been using voice for years. Some of them have been 10, 20
Mhm.
years potentially have been using voice, and they're looking for ways to find new gains within voice, and we certainly are helping them every day. But then there's this next phase of how do we have that ramp us into this next phase of automation, where data is now becoming, before data is owned by the host systems or maybe the edge technologies, but in the world of AI is coming forward, the companies are going to begin to own their data more and are going to be able to then leverage edge technology and host systems in a way that I don't think they've ever really been able to do in this industry. So it's a neat time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, it continues to be more and more interesting. And, I think the industry, just the things that we're able to do and accomplish, as you said, like earlier in our conversation, the problem solving and the problems we face and how we come up with solutions to address those, I think makes it so exciting to be in this industry. So very interesting to talk to you here, Alex, and really appreciate you coming on the show and telling us all about voice technology and culture and the future as well, and what that looks like, and how to kind of smartly go about that and think about the overall picture. And what that looks like long term as well. So, definitely appreciate the insights. And if people are interested in learning more about Mountain Leverage, or getting in touch with Mountain Leverage, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can reach us. It's Mountain Leverage, www.mountainleverage.com, or reach us on our socials. And we'll be happy if somebody reach out to you, have a conversation, see if there's something interesting for you, whether you're a longtime voice user who's feeling like you're kind of floating out the horse latitudes right now with no wind underneath your sails, or you've heard about this, or you're interested, or you want to take those next steps towards automation. We'll be happy to connect anytime.
All right, great. And we could say, find your voice with Mountain Leverage. There you
There
go.
you
I just
go.
gave you a jingle. But we'll put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well, so people can easily find it. So, Alex, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Awesome, Kevin. Thank you, and again, congrats on that 500. That's a big mark.
Thanks, sir. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesaresexy.com and get your own.